Well, good afternoon, listeners. Such a gift to be on here. I've been so blessed to have so many of these interviews, and 2026 has started out so well, and I'm just praying and hoping and seeing the way the Lord's bringing different guests at different times, and it's just great. And today I have on Taya and her son Colton Kyle. Those names might be familiar to you, especially Taya, because she is um, the wife of Chris Kyle, there was a film, American Sniper, that was made on his life. There's a book based on his life. She's also founded the Taya and Chris Kyle Family Foundation. And then Colton, her son, has an apparel brand that he's made based on the American Sniper in honor of his father and those who serve our country, both on and off the field. And Taya has also written several books. A few years ago, she came out with a children's book that really highlighted gratitude. Um, and I wanted to have her on and her son Colton, because they as a family have gone through a lot. If you know Chris Kyle's story and just the tragedy of his loss. But at the same time, they've worked through all of that suffering and still go through it, but there's just such a hope about their story and perseverance. It's very real. And I think whether you are related to a first responder, or if you have someone in your family who's been in the military or not, you can really relate to their story and just the lessons that they've learned. So thank you so much to both of you for taking the time to be on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, I'm going to start off with you, Colton, because you're the unexpected person in this interview, too. I wanted to ask you, when you're talking about your apparel brand, and then you're also telling me about some of the tools that you're creating that first responders might use, what I know that your father was a huge impetus for starting this. But what is it? Because I'm going to be honest with you, a lot of young people that I've been talking to, America is not a super happy topic for a lot of people right now. There's just a lot of controversy around America, and whatever side you're on with America, people just tend to devalue America, the freedoms of America, and everyone wants to be somewhere else. And that's just kind of the conversation at this point, especially for younger people. And patriotism in its purest form is not as popular, I'd say, as it was before. And so for you as a young person making things like this that's the passion behind it. How do you think it speaks to young people? Like, how is that something that you want young people to invest in and to be encouraged by?
Yeah, that's a big question. Most importantly, American Sniper is a company that I'm building to, one, honor my father's legacy, and two, and potentially more importantly, is to build on that, to continue the legacy in my own way, and to be able to allow others to buy into it. And so it's not just product. Everything that I make, every product that I put out is going to bleed 5 core values. That's godliness, patriotism, passion, service, and excellence. Those are the values that my father and I shared. And I believe that those are things that young people, like you're talking about, can get behind today. So what does it look like to be patriotic? I don't think it means that we wholeheartedly support every decision that maybe our most high up politicians make. But what I think it means is that we stand up for the reason why this country was founded in 1776. Why did we leave the British? Why did we rebel? Why was it so important to us to include in the Constitution that we need a freedom of speech, that we need freedom of religion, that we need freedom to be able to gather together, especially in religious places, the freedom to bear arms to prevent government overreach, which we're seeing constantly. And we've grown and grown and grown in this government overreach in numerous ways. And I think it's important to be able to remind people that's what patriotism is about, is that we're not blindly supporting whatever it is that America or Americans may do. but that we're getting behind the reason why we founded America. And we want to get back to that. We want to honor the foundations of this country. So that's part of it. And that's one pillar of American Sniper. The other things are, I believe, most importantly, one is godliness. And that's going to be pointing to Christ, pointing towards Christ in everything that we do. And the other four values come from that, come from godliness. I mean, patriotism is a godly, righteous value. You should care for the nation that you're in. You should want to see it grow and benefit and do well and bless others and do things the right way. You should be passionate about what you're doing. There's a reason that we have hope, that there's a reason that we're going through suffering at times, and there's a reason that we get to pour into other people. There's service. Obviously, we know that Christ served like none of us can. And that's why it's so important to be reminded of that we need to go out and serve those that we can. And then there's excellence. We want to be excellent in all that you do, and all that you do, do it for the glory of the Lord. So those things, I think, are things that any young person, especially a Christian, can get behind, because that's what, at the heart of it, that's where we get our moral code, is Christ. And even if you don't believe that it comes from Christ, you believe in a moral code. And how did we get there? Those are things that you can get behind and be passionate in. So the company that I'm building and the products that I offer, I do have apparel, and I also have other tactical products like shooting glasses. I'm working on backpacks. I'm working on cutlery, firearm collaborations, etc. And those are important to me, because I don't think we need to lose this warrior spirit. In a time where we're confused, in a time where we're depressed and distracted, we need to be bold and strong and unite to fight for what we believe in, because we will go down if we don't fight, and we will go down the wrong way. So it's reminding people we need to actually be aggressive about the things that we believe, and we need to fight wholeheartedly. There's a spiritual war going on, and we need to fight that. And spiritualities, principalities affect the physical world. And so we need to buy into that and fight back physically as well.
So, and I want to clarify this for people, because, a growing number of people do believe that violence is okay, is a way to talk about what they believe. Violence in the sense of hurting someone else. And we've seen that so often with the multiple shootings that have happened last year, which were terrible, and just continued violence against acts of free speech. And so when you say fight for and fight for aggressively, can you just elaborate on that for people listening who might be like, oh, does he think that it's okay if I don't agree with someone, like fight aggressively? What would that be defined as?
Sure. I think it takes a low intellect to resort to physical violence as the first as the first resort, right? There are a number of things that you should go through. And we know with Christ's actions, when he comes into the temple grounds and he sees that they're trading and they're taking advantage of the people, and he flips over tables. Christ is not passive. Christ is incredibly active, and he's passionate. And so what he does and the way that he does it is important, and we need to study that. And if you look at the early church fathers, they actually have a discussion about what does it mean when a Roman soldier comes to Christ? Do we ask him to leave the Roman army or the military? And the answer that they came up with was actually no, as he's doing his duty to serve the country. And we should support him in that. And we should make sure that he's doing things righteously to the very best of his ability. And that he should also not hold grudges against the people that he's fighting, because oftentimes they're doing the exact same thing. So it's a difficult and fine line. And I'm not calling for violence out of turn, but I don't think the Bible condemns violence for itself. I think we see numerous times where God actually commands especially in the Old Testament, the Israelites to go to war with people because they are wretched, and the people that they are going against are wicked and deserving of this. And now we don't see that necessarily in the New Testament, but what the New Testament focuses heavily on is the spiritual warfare. And like I said, we have to back that up physically when necessary. So we need people to be out there speaking life and speaking light and doing that aggressively, because that's important. So when I'm saying we need to fight for what we believe in, I'm saying in the ways that we can, when it is possible to find solutions that don't require violence, we should do that incredibly aggressively, and we should take that as a fight. And at a time, if it resorts to it, we should also not let ourselves be defenseless. We should be capable of what it takes. If we're talking about a mass shooting, there need to be people to eliminate that mass shooter. So we need to be prepared and we need to be capable of violence. In the Bible, especially in the 10 Commandments, a lot of people say one commandment is thou shalt not kill. That's not true. What is true is thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not unjustly take another person's life.
Yeah.
We should understand that it belongs to God. But if that person is trying to take the life of another person, especially an innocent one, we should be able to have discernment and intervene when necessary. So it's a complex answer, but it's also a complex problem that I believe requires divine discernment, and we need to be prayerful about it. And we can't use this as an excuse to be cowardly and ignore the problems of the world or not prepare for the worst.
Yes, and it's a very it's disciplined. When we say the word violence and talk about it, even, if what your dad did, what he being a sniper, I mean, it's disciplined. It's not something that's out of control or controlled by emotion. It's very driven by fact and by something you have to do, and whether or not you agree with that, doing that, or even, it's okay if you can't, if that's not something that you would be able to do. But it is a very conscious decision and something that is controlled. And so I think that is something we often forget when we just paint everything as violent. Taya, for you, I was going to ask you, how do you wrestle with this as, because I feel like, again, for you, it's similar. Times are very different now. Things have really, from 9/11 to now, and people's views on violence and guns being used and snipers, and it's such a controversial thing, and unfortunately so many veterans are not cared for. Suicide rate is really high among veterans, and it's just it's sad, and it's a hard topic. How are you, because you've seen this change in your lifetime, at least I feel like it has changed since I was a kid. um how do you work through that, and how do you see the world as it is now compared to where patriotism was maybe 20 years ago?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think you and Colton both did a great job of talking about something that is really complex and that people, might like to take a soundbite here and a soundbite there. And oftentimes they want to say, this person said this, and then
Yeah.
make that their whole thing. And it's too complex to do that. There has to be a conversation, which is why I loved listening to both of you. And Danielle, you said something really important about not led by emotion. And I think that's the biggest part of any violence that is righteous is usually, I mean, I'm not saying you don't have an emotional feeling, but it's a disciplined thing. And like Colton was saying, is it to save someone else? Is it to prevent someone else? Is it in defense of something? And people led by emotion and extreme emotion might use that as a justification when you're like, no, 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 that doesn't, no, that's, you're not using that appropriately. So it is a complex thing. And I think with your question about how are things changed, the majority of the emotional response and the patriotism before was in defense of something, right? 9/11, it's like, whoa, 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 we have to come together. And patriotism was, defense of our borders. Our country was founded to do four things. The federal government was only supposed to do four things. It was interstate roadway, so travel, whether it was trains or not. Postal, so we needed a postal service. We had to protect our borders.
Yeah.
And money. We had to manage the money. That was it, four things. And now our government does so many other things and has their hands in so many other pots, and it's gotten very complex, and bureaucracy is increasing. And so somewhere along the line, with all of that compounded interest and fractured idea of what government should do, we've become incentivized, we meaning politicians, not me, but politicians have become incentivized to use emotion against its people, to divide the people to get themselves into office. Being in office is really lucrative for people now, like stupidly lucrative. And so I think they have the financial incentive, they have the greed, the power incentive, and they don't have to like live by the rules of the land. right? They're creating laws that make it not them not have to live by the laws of the land. Even like political texts that they said, okay, not everybody can market and spam you like that, but we running for office still can. You know, it's pervasive.
Yeah.
And with that, there seems to be incentive to try to make people really angry,
Mm-hmm.
manipulate stories, and make us think we're against each other, that we want different things, and that half of us, if we support this person, must also be, you know, 100 other things, labeled 100 other things. That's never true. Just because you support a person doesn't mean you are put in a box of all the other things that you might believe.
Yeah.
But it's becoming, you know, I'm sure you guys have seen it too, but it's becoming such a thing that if they can create enough hate around one human being, you will stop thinking and you'll
Yeah.
stop looking at actions and
Yeah.
just decide that, you know, you throw everything in this box and hate. So I feel like that's the biggest threat to patriotism, is this ideology that if we can make people hate each other, we can get votes, we can be in office, and it destroys the people that they're marketing to, because they're getting this very emotional, not intellectual um, incentive, I guess, motivation to do something that does not make sense. You know, I think we all want the same things. We want a safe place that's loving and, you know, inclusive but not dangerous, and we want to support whoever's in office. We want everybody else to feel like our country is great, and somehow it's just getting completely lost in a tornado of people vying for our hatred.
I think that's been the hard, because when I was younger, um patriotism was a very unifying thing. It's this idea that everyone's going to come together to do the best for their country, to serve each other. Now, obviously, we are in a two-party system at this point. I mean, yeah, you've got an independent or whatever, but that, I mean, no offense, that never works yet, unfortunately. But it's just very, and so everyone has a different view on how that looks. But what I find so interesting is that, and this is something I'm wrestling with as a Christian, is I have faced so many people that I've talked to, people I've come across who've said, "You're a Christian, therefore you must believe this, therefore I don't think you want to talk to me." And I said, "Well, why not? Why wouldn't I want to talk to you? I mean, we don't have to agree on something, but can we discuss it? Can we talk together?" And there's just this automatic wall and barrier now that comes up where politics or is your identity. So it's not even really patriotism anymore, or that we are both Americans. So therefore, can we talk about America and what we would like to see America look like? It's very much, well, I identify as this, you identify as that, so I guess we can't talk.
Yeah.
And there's just automatic barriers that come up. And one thing that I struggle with, especially as a Christian, is like, I'm called to love all people. That doesn't mean I have to love all their decisions, which can be totally, brought together. And Colton, I don't know, you being, you know, around my age or, younger, it's like, it's a very, especially with younger generation, there's just so many problems we face outside of politics that the whole world seems to be ending. And so, the biggest thing is always talking about the core issues of living and life, and why, what being human means. What is our relationship to God? Is there a God? These questions that are more important than politics, and obviously politics not being our identity. But I have met so many Christians where politics is their identity, and it has come to a place where I have met several believers where they want to make America completely good for Christians, like our own heaven on earth for us. And I struggle with that. And I wonder for both of you, what your position is on that. But that's been hard for me. And that's been something I've seen kind of shift since I was younger, where patriotism was more the focus and what is best for our country and uniting together. Obviously, that can't be perfect because we differ on what that looks like. But at the same time, now it's just a visceral reaction to any sort of difference of opinion, even fear to discuss that, lest there should be some sort of repercussions. Um, and then for Christians, also sometimes an idolatry of making America a heaven when heaven is not here. This is temporal. So, how do you guys balance that? Because I've found that very hard.
Yeah, I'm happy to take it first, Colton, and then pass to you. But I think there is no heaven on this earth, right? That's the
Yeah,
reconciled earth that's coming later. So that's first. I think it's a very sad and difficult thing to accept that we are broken people, all of us. I think it would really be helpful if people came to the table with a lot more humility and a lot more grace. If they started with, I don't actually have all the answers. That would be
yeah,
huge because not one person living has all the answers. And not one of us can accurately predict if this, then that. It leaves God out of the equation entirely. It leaves the fallibility of human nature out. So none of us have the answer. If we would start with a humble heart and say, boy, based on the information that I've seen,
yeah,
I would lean toward this as a help. It's not an answer. That's to me, that's I don't want to say ignorant as a hateful way, but it lacks a lot of knowledge. Let's put it that way. If you were to say, if we just do this, it will solve all of these things. It's like, no, if we lean this way, I think we have a better chance based on the information I have, based on the experiences of my lifetime. This is what I believe. And I leave room for it not working out the way I think. A lot of times with politics, people they want to think if they paint one brushstroke here, it solves XYZ. And humanity is not that simple. It does
yeah,
not solve everything, but we can lean into it and we can try it and we can evaluate it. And I think, again, if there weren't, if the federal government was not so big and intrusive in every area of our life, if they just did the four things we were designed to do, every
yeah,
state could experiment with those laws because it's supposed to be on a state level that you do the rest of the laws. And then the rest of the states could look and say, I wonder how that worked in Kentucky. In Connecticut that worked. But they would get like a litmus test of the things that we're so convinced will work.
yeah,
And we would actually get to see it in sort of like a lab experiment, like, oh, that didn't work for them. What could we do then in Texas to adjust for that? It would really be a beautiful system. And it would be one that's more accurate in my mind of coming to things with a humble approach. And for me, I have to be very graceful in looking at people and thinking they have bought into an idea that hate is the answer. And somebody sold them that idea and they bought it and they sold them that idea because they wanted their vote, but it's
yeah.
never the truth. What do you think, Colton?
Um, Daniel, could you help me understand what are the two sides specifically that we're trying to balance in your question?
Well, for I think for Christians, there's a temptation to, certain politicians, every politician, kind of as your mom was saying earlier, has an agenda. And you'd hope that, one agenda is going to help us better than the other. But I think as Christians, we can become tempted to make America a place where Christians thrive and everyone else just kind of there's a big hatred toward anything oppositional. Now, I agree that opposition has to exist at times, but this hatred of like you versus me, and I want to make world better for me, not you, and under the guise of this is what Jesus would want, this is how we're going to make the world a better place. But at the same time, and that's what currently I see happening right now. Like it goes back and forth, but right now the biggest thing is an all-consuming identity among several believers of this idea that politics is becoming almost at the same level as Christ. Like they're interspersing and they're like the same thing. And I'm wondering for you as a young person, seeing that, and you're trying to encourage young people to embrace patriotism when now people see patriotism as another word for politics and America, and oh boy, I don't like a lot of these things going on, or I don't like this person, so I don't want to be any part of this. I don't want to have a conversation about this. I don't want to talk about this. I want, and in many cases, there's very hateful statements made and violence that's resorted, and just all of this emotion. And so I wonder, as a young person, like how you're balancing that. I mean, and for both of you too, I mean, I'm finding it hard sometimes to be faithful in the sphere I'm in, because it can become all consuming what's going on. And I have to be reminded that I have to be faithful in what the Lord has given me to do, just as you guys have to be faithful what you've been given to do. But it can become all consuming, and it can become quite distressing. And so I'm just wondering how you're balancing that, Colton, as a young person, and also with what you're trying to do with the apparel line and the tools you're creating to encourage people of patriotism, when now they're thinking of patriotism in a totally different way than we might have discussed it 20 years ago. You know, it's very political now. It's not about America, it's about a lot of other things.
Yeah. Well, that's another complex one. The beginning is always focusing on Christ and trying to be godly. So
Yeah.
American Sniper is not first and foremost a patriotic brand. It's first and foremost a godly brand. And that's the important distinction to make. And I think why patriotism is such a big part of it is because that is why our country specifically was founded, was so that we could have these godly values, that they could essentially be the rule for our lives and our communities, is we're trying to follow the law of God. So when when I want to have a productive discussion with someone, especially someone that I disagree with, we have to define the terms that we're working with. And I think that's something that we need to become a lot more familiar with, is not submitting to the stigmas that words may have, but
Hmm.
instead coming to a discussion saying, here's what this word means. Let's agree on what these words mean before we try and use them in this discussion. Because if I understand patriotism as I'm trying to make America the very best that it can be, and by the very best, I mean it's going to look like a Christ-like society that benefits the nations around it, and also is going to defend and take care of itself when necessary.
Hmm.
Now, that's how I view it. But you come to the table and you view patriotism, you being whoever this other person is, come to the table and you view patriotism as I want the best for the elite class in America, or I want America to be Christian only and everyone else should be leaving. That's not going to lend itself to a very productive conversation. So I think whenever I'm talking to somebody, and I encourage open discussion because, like you said, I think it's very important that we discuss with people, especially ones that we disagree with. If we're trying to work toward an idyllic state for America, then we need to agree on what the terms are that we're using and what their meaning is. So I want to remind people about what patriotism means, that it's actually not about politics in the way that we're thinking about it, like a two-party system. It's about, we want America to be the very best that can be. And
Right.
that is the Christian standard. I mean, if you ask people about morality, it comes back to the Christian standard. That's what it is. That's where we get morality. And a lot of people don't want to recognize that, and that's okay. But that's what we're working towards.
Right.
So I agree with you. I see people that are getting so wrapped up in politics that it becomes their identity instead of Christ being their identity. That's certainly a problem. And there's a way to lovingly engage with that. I also understand the fact that America is 250 years old.
Yeah.
We're not that old of a country. In
No.
fact, we're very young. And from where we started, we are having massive crises. So we need to be very proactive in the sphere of politics if we believe that's how we're going to change this country. So I understand that for those people, it's a slippery slope And I don't think it's often intentional or hateful, especially for believers. I think
Yeah.
it's they care about their country, they care about the people around them, like Christ
Yes.
wants us to do, and we
That's
want to
true.
serve them in a
Yeah.
better way. And so, how do we do that? Is we become very proactive in the space where we're affecting these people's day-to-day lives, where we're affecting the trajectory of this country, and hopefully we're moving it towards a more Christ-like standard. And I agree that we can't have heaven on earth, but that doesn't stop us from taking every single step that we can to get to that point. Just like we can't obey a perfect moral standard, but every day we should have the expectation that we are to live up to that. And if not, there are repercussions. But that is the expectation. We are working towards that. So I would I would recommend to people don't demonize those that are active in politics, but watch them carefully because we know that there are a lot of incentives, like my mom was talking about, to not do the right thing. There's a lot of money in politics. It is very lucrative. That's something that we had hoped to avoid, but
Yeah.
where there's power, there's money, and then more power, more money. Um, so I would to wrap it up in a bow, encourage open discussion, define the terms, and for me specifically, what does it mean to be patriotic, and why is that so central to being Christ-like? It's because it's caring about the people around you, caring about your country, and wanting it to be a country that Jesus comes back to and he says, you guys did well. You're working hard and you're not perfect. It's not heaven. That's why I'm here. But you guys did well. And I'm proud of that. That's what it's about.
Do you find it hard, Colton, to be a young American now? Like in where we're living now in this time?
That's a tough question. I don't think it's very hard to be an American. Apparently, anybody can be American now, but that's just a joke. No, but for me,
I
I
hear
don't
some
know.
screams in the background somewhere.
Yeah. Um, for me, it is the difficulty is being constantly subjected to um, media, especially media that is so polarizing, because the
Hmm.
more that we become desensitized to things, the more that the media needs to up their game with how they get our emotional engagement. So it is difficult to walk the line of how do I see something that should in another time have made me feel absolutely enraged. How do I look at that and try and see through it? What's the motivation for showing me this? Why now? And what do I do with this information? How can I be productive? How do I not take this in clear injustice that I see on my screen and try and take out my anger on someone else?
Mm,
So that's the difficulty, but
yeah.
it's a unique difficulty, and we have different challenges, and we're blessed with a lot more, especially in terms of convenience and technological development, than our ancestors had. So I wouldn't say it's any harder than what anyone else is going through in other countries. I think it's I think in the modern age, especially for young people, it's easy to, because we have access to so much information, it's easy to see the ways that we're being screwed over. It's easy to see the ways that we should have had things differently, where
Yeah.
maybe our ancestors wouldn't have had that same capability. And so that can be upsetting. But just because we see it or our ancestors didn't see it doesn't mean that they weren't also facing these incredibly unique challenges of their own time period. So I don't think it's any more difficult. I think it's a different kind of difficult, one that we need to continue to adapt to, and we need to remember, just like I believe you're doing, which is great, is that there's a reason to have hope. Is that despite this sinful, fallen world, we have a God who loves us and a God who cares so much about us that in our worst moment, he loves us just as much as in our best moments. And that there's hope for the people around us. There is hope for justice. And we
Yeah.
will see that at one time. And we do get to see the fruits of our labor when we put in the work to see it happening in front of us.
And it's such a good point you brought up with the media, because I think this past year, especially in 2025, we had so many awful things happen. I mean, it was just like, you know, so many people died, so many things happened, and it was just like inundated with all of these perspectives and all of this stuff. And my husband, he sent me an article just this morning, and it was so interesting to me, and it was talking about how it's so quick for so many news commentators. We take these little assumptions about people or these little things about people that look off, and we put them on top of each other, and then before you know it, we're like, oh my gosh, look at how terrible this person is. Well, we didn't build any evidence there. All we did was just take a bunch of little assumptions that, when added up, boy, does that look bad. But we don't actually know the heart of the person. Nobody's talking to that person. We're not really getting any information about the event or the person. Is more of just all of these assumptions, and then when you put them together, the picture looks really terrible, or whatever it is. And I think that's in part, when you were talking about media, that I think that drives emotion. And so you're just going back to the media, or you're going back to that source, and this is widespread, of whoever it is, where you're wanting another kick of that emotion, and then that just mounts and mounts and mounts and mounts, and that helps with the anger. And that's just like, I love too how you said there, and that's the thing, even when I speak with people who don't believe in Jesus or God, it's like the Christian has hope. Like, there will be justice, perfect justice one day. And I can look forward to that. That doesn't mean, like you said, Colton, that you do have to advocate for justice in your present time. You don't just sit back and say, well, Jesus will one day make all of this right, so I'm just not going to do anything. But also, I can be encouraged that I don't have to save the world now, today. Not all of the burdens of the world are upon me to save. Whereas with so many others I've talked to, it feels that way, because there is no other end. There is no other option. There is no God to help in the end. It's just you. You figure it out. And that's super overwhelming because you're finite. So there's just no way to do that. And I think that adds to just the depression and the sadness that so many people are facing, is this helplessness of like, the world keeps going on and I can't do anything about it. And I think as Christians, people are going to say, well, maybe that's a crutch for you that you can believe that, but it's true. And that's the hope that we have. And we don't have to be infinite. We are allowing ourselves to be finite and recognizing that limitness. But I was gonna, I know you've said your story so many times about your dad, so that's why I didn't want to focus the interview so much on that, as I know so many people have heard that story, the movie, all of these things. But I did want to ask you, I'm several years removed from several traumatic events that have happened in my life, and so many people have gone through hardship. And I used to, and now I've come to this point where I never tell people, yeah, I'm over it. It doesn't bother me anymore. I have days, and they become less frequent as time goes on, and there's a kindness to that. But there are days when it still hits you. Something hits you, a memory, some person, something, and you cry, or it comes back, and it's like this sweet, bitter wound in the soul. And so, and that can be the moment where a question comes back and you're like, why did this happen? And I just wondered, for you guys, for each of you separately, when that does happen for you, and remembering what happened to your dad, for you, Taya, your husband, what do you do in that moment? How do you process? Because as some people say, well, I just push it aside, and it happened. I know why. I'm not going to ask any questions. Even some Christians do that too, because to wrestle with feelings of anger or any sort of emotion is something they feel guilty about, and they don't really know how to talk to God about it. So, don't do it. So I just wondered how that looks for you when that comes up. Maybe you can even say a time recently when that's happened and how you kind of processed that.
Yeah, I want to say 3 quick things, then I'll kick it over to my mom because I'm taking up a lot of airtime, and her insight's very valuable. One, going back to what we were talking about, with everything being online, it's not that our world is getting worse. It's just that we're recognizing it more.
Yeah.
Right? These things have
It's
been
true.
happening forever, and now we're just actually seeing them more often. Two, for those who believe that faith is a crutch, I would say that the absence or um, the abandonment of faith is a crutch to live life exactly how you want to live life with no obligation to whatever morality, because morality is essentially what you make it at that point, whatever you arbitrarily decide. And then, despite whatever it is you feel deep down inside, you can say that you're doing the right thing because you don't have a strict moral code. You don't have that accountability.
Yeah, and being a Christian is freaking hard.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say.
Yeah. Yeah. And three, going back to your question that you had just asked about how we deal with these things, and importantly, Christians feeling guilty about feeling angry. There's nothing wrong with anger. I think if we want to learn how to deal with grief and how to properly lament, we need to go to the Psalms and we need to study David and see that God is calling him a man after his own heart. And he's doing that in the midst of David pouring out his heart to God, saying, I am so mad. I am in despair. I am confused. Whatever it is, I am broken. I am wretched. I need your help. He's opening up his heart to the Lord, and God is not condemning him for that. He may be mad at God, and God is not going to condemn him for that, because he's going to come to him and say, this is how I feel. Help me. I know that you can figure this out, and I know that I can't on my own, so I need you to help me. So I want to remind anyone who's struggling with that is that feelings are important, and we don't need to act on those right away, but we should, at the very least, be talking to God about them wholeheartedly and vulnerably. Yeah, Mom, you take it from there. I know you've got a lot of wise insight on this.
No, man, I have loved listening to you two talk. Seriously, I'm fully tuned in and loving it. And you guys are so interesting, introspective, thoughtful, deep, and I love hearing how it is from your point of view to live in this country, to live as Christians. So, no, it's just been a privilege to listen. I I think one of the things too that I find comfort in when I look at the state of things, whether it's people my age saying, well, what about our kids growing up in this generation? People have always said that. They never know what's next for them. But the thing is, God's not surprised about any of this. He allowed us all to be born in the time we're born in, knowing he could do good with it. And whatever I start to get, discouraged or something, I remind myself, God is not surprised. And he allowed it only when he knows, I believe this, that he only allows things that he knows he will bring good through and that he will use for his glory. And one of the ways that somebody described glory recently, I think it was Tony Evans, Pastor Tony, Dr. Tony Evans, is he was saying glory is that God is a big deal, right? And the reason that he wants that is not because he needs that. He already knows who he is. He wants us to see his glory so that we can have trust and hope that he is all that and he can do all these things and that he can bring good through them. And so anytime I start to think, oh no, I'm afraid of this, or oh no, it's like God's not surprised and he allowed it. He could have stopped it. He allowed it because he knows he can bring good through it for his people who want it. And he can be glorified through it. And the more he's glorified, the more people are blessed. And the more people come to him and say, okay, I'm ready to look at you, God. Like, I'm seeing that you're kind of a big deal to these other people. What is it about you? And am I really your child? So I think that can be pretty fascinating. And to Colton's point and your points about grief and feelings, I certainly came from a place where I just thought happy was the goal. And so I was going to do everything I could to get to happy and to get my kids to happy. And some of those things God used for good. I started to develop some thoughts when Chris was alive, like he was in gunfights every day. And I could not raise my kids in a happy home and be scared all the time. And so I developed a mantra that was, until it's me, it's not me. And what I meant by that was, until someone's standing in front of me, looking at me in the eye, saying, Chris is dead, he's alive and he's well. Until somebody tells me he's not, he is. I'm not going to borrow that fear. What if? No, today he is alive and he is well. And that served me well, even up until the day that he died, when we hadn't heard from him in a while. We didn't know what was going on. We were supposed to go out to dinner with our friends that night, and we had a joyful day. And um and so I think that's really big. The next lesson that I had to learn was that happy isn't necessarily the goal of this life. So while God did something good with my desire for happy and taught me some things that allowed me to let go of fear, I also realized that holy is the goal, not happy. And holy means everything you guys were saying so eloquently. Holy means I'm crying out to you, God, because I'm sad. Um, Holy means recognizing that God sent Jesus because he could know things with all his knowledge, but he chose to experience them through Jesus. He wanted experiential knowledge of his children and their grief and their pain, and he was willing to live it and the suffering. So we have a God that knows, not just by knowledge, but like experiential knowing.
Mm.
So I'm learning through both of my kids, Colton and McKenna. They teach me so much. And Colton and I started to grieve similarly, where it was like, stay as busy as we can, be distracted. And because that pain is too much to sit in. My daughter was youngest one in the family, and so she came along for that, but she was growing slowly more and more miserable over time. And here Colton and I are encouraging her, let's go and come on, jump on board, this will help. And what I've recognized by the grace of God in the last few years is that what she really needed was someone to sit in the pain with her, because she was ready and willing to sit in it. And that was how she was going to process it. And the distracting from it to her was more damaging. And she's a very positive and fun and laughing person. And so it was really easy for me to miss. There was a deeper, profound need in her. And so what I've learned through that, even in some of the most joyous things we've had recently, Colton's wedding being one of them, was that we got to live in the joy. Colton's wife, Carrie, is, I mean, if everybody could be a Carrie, like she's so ridiculously amazing. We love her so much. And so it was such a joy. And we got to have family there and everything was beautiful. And afterward, McKenna and I had a really profound, deep, sad cry. And instead of what I would have done before, which is to say, yes, and I've learned not to say but, because a therapist had told me you have got to stop saying but if it's the last, because it negates everything before it. These things are bad, but she was like, no, it's and. These things are bad, and there is good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I really had to learn that, and I would say those things to her then, yes, well, this and this is also. And what I had to learn was to sit in it with her without the and. She's super smart. She already knows all the ands. She knows what's good. But is anybody willing to sit in the bad, the hard, the sad? And so I did it with her, and it was incredibly sad. It was incredibly hard for me to just sit in the pain with her that her dad wasn't there, that she wanted her dad there for Colton. She wanted her dad there for Carrie. He would have loved her. And I rarely say what Chris would have thought. I don't think anybody should do that, by the way. It's a pet peeve of mine. But this I am certain of. Because I don't think we should speak for the dead. It's too, life is too complicated to know what they would have thought or done, but she's so lovable. So, but that Carrie's dad gave her such a great tribute and toast, and McKenna's sadness that she will never hear that, with her dad.
Yeah.
And, and then just the stages of life, right? We're moving on to the next stage, and reflecting on kind of how her life has been very different than Colton's. And I realized, oh, this is why I don't do this very often. This is why I've been running from this so long. This is why I've always wanted to say, oh, this is really painful. And like, the part of me that wants to rescue me from the pain comes in like a little, light bulb on the shoulder and like, yeah, but don't forget, And so she's taught me how to sit in the lament and the crying part better. And I say that because it surprises me, because all along the way I have cried my eyes out. So while I was searching for happy, I have cried, I have sobbed, I have gone to therapy, I have felt. I just recognize that there are some people who can and will and need to just sit in it, to fully process it. And I just processed differently. It was like a lot of pain and a lot of this, that, and a lot of pain and a lot of this, that, Um, and so there is a beauty and a profound healing effect when we have the courage to sit with another person in their pain and not try to fix it, not try to show them why it's okay. It is, for me, it's brave to sit with somebody else and just sit and say
Yeah.
it's okay to just sit in that with you and not try to tell you anything new. Um,
Yeah.
Yet I think it's beautiful and it's important, especially in a world where social media has a fix for everything. We can totally miss the point. I certainly did. That sometimes the real healing is to just sit with the person in it.
I mean, that it's so scary, and I think that is when that's what Jesus did all the time
Yeah.
when he was here and he sat with people he knew wouldn't even believe in him. He provided food, he provided rest, he provided healing. Even when he knew what people were coming to him for, even if they never came wanting salvation, he still gave them, that temporal thing, that temporal comfort they needed. And that's another thing that I find so beautiful about life, even in the midst of what we were talking about with all this political division and difference. Many times I've just said to someone, well, have you cried before? And they're like, yeah, I have. And I'm like, okay, well, have you laughed before? They're like, yeah. I'm like, me too. So do you mind if we cry and laugh about something together, and then maybe we can talk about politics after that? It might be my much better set in mind after that to do that. And I think that's just so important, and I think that's where Christ works the most, is in those moments. They're so hard, they're so unhuman and human at the same time, because it's like, I can't do this. And then when you do it, you're like, wow, I've touched something eternal at right in this moment. And it hurts, and then it's good at the same time. And then one day it's going to be completely good, because we won't have the crying painful part, and it'll all be happy.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking forward to that. But I thank you for sharing that. I understand with the wedding, and but I'm comforted too, though, that the Lord will. She's not married yet, is she?
No, she's not. And I think, and she's not, in a serious relationship. And she has not been like actively seeking it. And I think there was a part of her too, maybe that opened up that, um, there, of course, she's one of the most loving people I've ever met. Somebody will be so lucky. But she hasn't been the young girl that's like, oh, I want to be in a relationship. And I think also pretty much everyone who knows Colton and Carrie, when you see them, you're like, oh yeah, why wouldn't I want that? If that's what her relationship, I want that. Um, and so it's been really, interesting, and God is going to work in the ways that he works. I wanted to say what you said about Jesus just sitting with people is so true. And that it kind of hit me. Yes, he had parables and he had stories, but a large part of what he did is help us see how to love him and stay focused on him while accepting, in some ways, where we are and what the battle is. He was fighting it too, obviously, casting out demons and doing his work, and he was spiritual warfare all over the place. And there's a certain part, like when he would tell, sons of thunder to step down and not get
Mm-hmm.
it was like he's teaching us to accept that there is also this part of human nature. Yes, we are here for spiritual warfare. And there's just going to be some just dang hard, we're just going to cry, we're going to weep, and we're going to need rest. And when I think Jesus was responsible for saving all of us and he still took time to rest, it
Yeah.
underscores how much I need to do that too.
Well, and yeah, and it reminded me too, for your daughter. I don't know. I mean, something that I think about is like, I had my wedding years ago, and my dad wasn't at my wedding, and I really struggled with how to do the whole dad thing at the wedding, because he's always like such a huge part of everything, and I've cried so much since then at other weddings when I see dads and daughters dance. And my husband came and got me when I was walking down the aisle to represent Christ coming for his bride, and I didn't have my earthly dad there, and I cried over it a lot, but I had the comfort of knowing that Jesus was there and he loved me, and he was using other people to comfort that hole, but the hole was still there. And that's why I say being a Christian is hard, as a Christian doesn't ever reject reality.
Yeah.
In fact, we're called to accept it so radically that we live in it. And that's just like, we can't have distraction, and that's all of life, is just trying to be distracted. You don't want to be in pain, but a Christian is actually called to look at the pain and say, hallelujah, here I am still.
Yes.
It's like, oh Lord, it's complicated, it's hard, it hurts, it's dirty, it's really rough.
Yes.
But I'm so grateful for you guys. What a good conversation. And Colton, congratulations on getting married. That's
Thank you very
super
much.
exciting. Whole
you.
new doors opening up there.
Yeah.
So thank you so much to Taya for talking with us. And I hope this all worked out free ways. I've never done this before with free people, so hopefully this all worked out.
It did for
I think
us.
it did.
Yeah, I thought it was great. And what you said about your husband coming to meet you, like Christ, getting his bride. Oh, that makes me so teary. That's so beautiful. I've never heard that before, but I know I'll be sharing that with other people. The symbolism of that is really powerful and cool.
Well, my mentor was in the audience watching, and we caught it on tape where she looks at her husband. She was like, ah!
That's awesome.
And I just felt that moment God worked it out. He provided, but it's still sad, but it was so beautiful too. So for your daughter, when that time comes, I know God will give her strength when she can't have him there.
Yeah. And I mean, she said it more than once that Colton, although they're very close in age, is her person too. And so, but I had to be like, well, Colton's going to be here. Colton's going to do this, because we know, everybody who knows him knows that he will, and it'll be great. But it was like not about that, right? It was about not having her dad, and that was the part we had to sit in. It's not what are we going to do with it, but let's just sit in the what's not. So thank you for sharing your experience too. And I'm sorry that you've gone through a lot. I don't know the specifics, but I know you speak from a place of experience just by the way you're talking.
Well, it's such a gift to talk to other people who understand.
Yeah.
So, but thank you so much. Such a gift. Blessings to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Bless you too.
Thank you, Danielle. I appreciate it.